Hello. If you're one of those people who is in back-to-back Zoom meetings all day, I bet you're exhausted at the end of the night. So what I want to talk about today is how you can take a little bit more control back of those Zoom meetings, and that requires us understanding why Zoom meetings are so tiring. My first recommendation is that you use the right communication medium for the right purpose. So all sorts of communication media exist: face-to-face, video conference, audio, telephone, and email, and so on. And they vary in how rich they are. The richest, of course, is face-to-face communication. And that means that it's got all the social and physical cues that you need to be able to understand subtle nuances in conversation, or when somebody wants to speak, or when it's silent. It's not usually a big deal because you can see that someone's thinking, and so on. So we usually would like to use face-to-face communication for these sorts of interpersonally more challenging things, such as negotiating or persuading people, or dealing with conflict, or managing performance, or even just trying to get everyone on the same page. Anything that requires some interpersonal dynamics, face-to-face is the best. Of course, we can't use face-to-face, many of us right now, and so we're having to rely on Zoom and other such forms of video conference. And look, on the one hand, they're great. They have got some richness. We can see people's face, we can hear their voice, and so on, but they are still impaired. We are not in the same context. We can't see their body language. We can't maintain proper eye contact with them, and so on. And all this means that we're trying to have these interpersonally demanding conversations sometimes, and we have to work really hard to do it in this situation where the cues are not quite as good as face-to-face. So we have to put in a whole lot of effort to show that we're listening and that we understand. Personally, I find myself nodding incessantly just to convey, oh yes, I'm listening, I can hear you. So we don't want to then waste our Zoom energy on tasks that could be done in some other way. And actually, research shows that if you've got a task that involves, for example, idea generation, so brainstorming, for example, then actually it's often done better in something like an online chat or discussion forum, because in those computer-mediated communications, actually power and status are mitigated a little bit. And that means people are more likely to feel free and less inhibited to put forward their ideas. Also, if you're just giving information, updating people, we all know that email is the best form for that. So don't waste your Zoom energy and all that intensity that's required with Zoom. Don't waste that on things like brainstorming, idea generation, and of course that more straightforward giving of information. Save your Zoom for that when we really need that slightly more rich communication. Number 2, get off the stage and use your phone occasionally. I had a real aha moment this week because the internet crashed and I was talking to someone, and so I had to switch to my mobile phone. And the instant I did that, I felt liberated. I actually got up and started walking around. So I untethered myself from my chair and I walked around and I picked a few weeds out of the pot plant. If you didn't know, my office is in the garden. I sat in the sun for a bit. I even did a few back stretches. So Goffman is a sociologist from the 1950s, and he talks about front of stage social interactions, which is when we are formally performing, as in actors on a stage, and back of stage interactions. And when we're on Zoom, we're sort of front of stage. We are visible. Not only do we know that others are looking at us, we can often see ourselves looking at other people. So we are very visible, and that adds to the intensity and the demands of the conversation. In particular, it makes you more inclined to want to present a positive image, which is called self-presentation. So for example, if you're on Zoom, and this happens to me all the time, I'm on Zoom and I forget that I am staring at which I keep doing with this video, by the way, I forget that I am meant to be looking at the camera, not at the person's eyes on the front of the screen. And so I'm constantly having to notice this, correct myself and look up at the camera. And this all just adds to the demands of those meetings. So get off the stage, pick up that thing called your mobile phone, that sort of old-fashioned thing. And you may find that for some meetings, particularly if it's just a one-on-one or it's not, an interpersonally complex sort of situation, you may find that this is a real welcome break in your back-to-back meeting day. And my third recommendation actually is 3 recommendations in one. And the first is schedule short meetings. So because of the intensity of Zoom meetings, we need to make them shorter and we need to schedule them to be shorter. So Stephen Rogelberg, who's a professor who wrote the book called The Science of Meetings, he basically observed and showed that the meetings are as long as we schedule them for. We always fill them out. If it's an hour, we'll take an hour. So schedule shorter meetings. I personally think no more than 30 minutes is what we should be aiming for. Number 2, in this third recommendation, take some breaks. Just a micro break, just 10 seconds even. Get up, stretch, maybe even walk outside and look at the horizon. We know that we're all becoming more myopic because of our screen use, so look out into the distance. And third is allow yourself just a little bit of chit chat with meetings. We know from research that video conferencing is much more task focused than face-to-face meetings. And I think again, this adds to the sense of exhaustion. So allow just a little bit, doesn't have to be too much because we want to keep the meetings short, but just a little bit of that informal backstage chit chat as part of your meeting. So if you're a Zoom zombie, what I'm recommending that you do is only use the richer medium of Zoom when you really need to. Number 2, get off the stage occasionally. That richness sometimes hurts us because we're sort of tethered to the screen. Number 3, schedule shorter meetings, take breaks, and allow yourself just a little bit of chit chat. Good luck. And this means that we are often, I just realized that I did all that without looking at the camera. So I'm going to start again. If you're someone who's still doing it, I'm looking at myself, and this is what we bloody do on Zoom. We look at ourselves instead of the bloody camera.